A new survey by the International Committee of the Red Cross finds that millennials are nervous about the future as wars and armed conflicts grow more complex and global tensions run high. About half of millennials surveyed in countries both at war and at peace expect to see a third world war in their lifetime. Nearly 60% of millennials in the U.S. agree. ICRC spokesperson Elizabeth Shaw.
We wanted to engage with the future decision makers and thought leaders about how they view war. Now, if they're right about World War III in their lifetimes, then their support for the laws of war is really crucial.
Despite their concerns, millennials said they care deeply about victims of war.
So the overwhelming majority of millennials who we spoke to for this survey said that most wars and conflicts could be avoided and that civilian casualties should be avoided at all costs. This is really good news because wars have limits.
Share your thoughts using #millennials on war or visit icrc.org for more information.